Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the Asia Impact webinar series. In pursuing our mission of building meaningful lives, the Milken Institute is tapping into our unique ability to convene leaders from across sectors and markets, and we're partnering with the South China Morning Post to lead global conversations about Asia. The Asia Impact webinar series will focus on the key issues shaping the future of the region. And now, I would like to pass it on to Gary Liu, the CEO of the South China Morning Post. Thank you for joining us today.
As the world continues to grapple with the pandemic, the experience of many Asian countries in recovery could well be a guide on how the globe resumes social and economic activities safely and with innovation. The SCMP is pleased to collaborate with the Milken Institute in bringing you these important explorations on how Asia is defining a new normal, creating safer, more resilient, and more connected systems for the post-COVID world. We trust that you will benefit from the expert insights in today's webinar.
Next series webinar on building the post-pandemic global workforce, presented in partnership with the Milken Institute Asia Center. I'm Lynn Lee, the South China Morning Post's Asia editor, and I'll be the moderator for the next 45 minutes. We'll have some time for audience Q&A towards the end of the session. Our speakers today are Renee McGowan, the CEO for Asia at Mercer, Amit Mazari, President of Microsoft Asia, Anup Sagu, the Group Operating Officer for Growth Markets at Accenture, and Panelist Machama, President of APAC for Career Builder. To kick off our discussion, it's fair to say that 2020 has been a year like no other in recent memory. The COVID-19 pandemic that is still raging in some parts of the world has upended society and disrupted all aspects of the economy, from production to jobs to supply chains. And for business leaders and for the workforce, the question now is, where do we go from here? What is work and the workplace going to be like in future? I'd like to turn to our four speakers now for their insights and ideas. I'd like to start with Amit. Can you share with us examples of industries that have deployed technology for business innovations to ensure continuity?
Good morning, Lynn, and good morning, all. Thank you for having us on this webinar this morning. Pleasure to speak with you. You rightly started by saying, a lot has happened in 2020. Surely a lot of memories as we go back in the past. But what crisis has done is that it has actually accelerated innovation. And we did a research recently which said that 74% companies actually raised their hand to say that innovation got accelerated. And amongst the leaders, about half the companies said that they accelerated at twice the pace. So what the crisis has done is it has forced organizations to prepare for the future. And I'll share with you a couple of examples that may be quite useful for us to carry through. If you look at the response phase of the pandemic, initially we were just scrambling, and schools had been shut down across the world. And with the Taiwan government across 4,000 schools, 250,000 teachers, and 2.5 million students, we enabled them to continue education. At NHS, where we worked with the NHS Foundation, and we realized at Imperial College that every COVID patient was being seen by 29 doctors. Now, what it did was that you exposed 29 doctors at every patient interaction, and you did not have the capacity. So using HoloLenses and AI technology, we actually created a virtual experiences for the doctors. And we were not only saving crucial PPE kits, but actually saving doctors from getting exposed to COVID.
So do you expect these innovations or this move to greater digitalization to remain even as the economy recovers? And what implications do you think this will have for Asian countries, especially when it comes to educating younger populations or even upskilling and reskilling the workforce?
Sure. Digital transformation, as Satya said earlier this year, that we saw 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. So that necessitated a change in how we work and how we approach life. Change is elastic, but innovation is continuous. And what it will do is it will force companies to think differently. Organizational models are being changed. Data aggregation platforms are looking at new alternate models. There is an insurance company we work with that is looking to move into assurance. So think about not having to write a check for medical insurance, but having to write a check for keeping healthy. And that's all driven by innovation and data at the core. You made a great point about skilling. Skilling is at the core, but we think about skilling in many, many ways. I mean, today, there are still tens of millions of people without jobs. And at its peak, 78 million people lost jobs. But we still struggle for skills on technology. We still have jobs around AI and data and pure coding not available at scale. But to the people who are impacted, an example I shared recently was, in partnership with Grab, we trained 100 of their drivers on basic technology. And these were drivers who lost their jobs. And they're now employed in at the starting point of tech skills and tech roles. So we have to play a very important role in skilling. And we play a very inclusive role in it. In Asia this year, we have trained about 1.5 million people, globally over 10 million, with an ambition to go to 25 million.
Thank you for that. If I could turn to Anoop, I'd like to talk about, this greater reliance on virtualization and automation. How do you think this can be combined with, human skills and capabilities for businesses to achieve the best results? And I think, if you could also elaborate on how companies can kind of close any digital divides that may exist within their organization.
Thank you, Lynn. Firstly, on the pandemic itself, it's clearly amplified many of the gaps that existed in the old world. A simple example to think about that is commerce. During the pandemic lockdown, many companies had maybe invested a little bit in e-commerce and have had to radically change the way they think about that in order to continue to serve their customers. And our view is that this combination of technology and human ingenuity really allows you to sort of augment, enhance, and actually in some cases reinvent the way that processes work. I mean, to give you some practical examples, you can combine human and technology together to improve customer experience. Nowadays, when a lot of us are thinking about customer service issues that we have, maybe in the old day, you may have sat on the phone for quite a number of hours waiting to speak to someone. Nowadays, we've all seen the chatbots that exist. You can actually quite easily interact with people through a multitude of channels, and that improves the customer experience. Technology also plays, I think, a very critical part in simulation. Simulation is a technique that allows a lot of very complex industries to de-risk the way that processes work. A classic example of that is in asset-intensive industries, like in mining, where you can use simulation to completely model the way that some of the mines work or how some of the physical assets work, and that de-risks things from a health and safety perspective. And then finally, technology can allow you to do things that you simply cannot do in the old world, from thinking about how you serve your customers, but also identifying problems and solving them even before they happen. So preventative maintenance has become a big issue, and using technology and using applied intelligence, you can use that to really predict failure rates, which allows you to change things before they actually happen. And then finally, on your question around the digital divide, I guess we look at this in two ways. The first angle around this is how do you drive a culture of learning within the organization? Technology is changing at a very radical pace, and you need to create a culture of learning within your own organization to allow your workforce to skill themselves in the appropriate way. In our organization, which is a highly technology-centric organization, we now like to think about TQ, technology quotient, along with EQ and IQ as being an important factor. And then the last point is around change. encouraging digital ways of working as being the norm. And that can take some time for organizations to really try to adopt, particularly organizations that are digitizing the entire way that they're working. And that change requires a consistent communication with people, consistent reinforcement of using digital technologies. In our own organization, as an example, over the last 5 years, we've moved ourselves 95% into the cloud, and it's required us all to change the way that we work day to day. And we're now seeing the benefits of that. And those, I think, are the two factors to consider within organizations that are looking to advance their digital journey.
Okay, thanks for that. Actually, I'd like to follow up on this point you make on the technology quotient. How do you think companies can assess this TQ? For instance, even when they're hiring new employees, is it about asking questions? Is it about demonstrating skills? Is it about certifications?
Yeah, I mean, I believe a lot of this comes down to learning, because I think in the environment that we're in today, technology is not static. It's evolving at a very, very fast pace. So, what's critical, I think, is trying to create this learning environment that I referred to. And in thinking about, how people, the younger generation are coming up, and individuals that you may recruit into your organization, it's adaptability and ability to actually learn, and the willingness to learn and change is actually a very, very critical factor than the technical skills itself. Because, in 5 years' time, the technology that we will be using will be radically different. And no doubt we will need to sort of change the way that that is adopted within the organization. So for me, adaptability, flexibility, and ability to and learning are very, very critical factors nowadays.
Okay, so it's really about having the right mindset then for employees. Thank you for that.
Which, by the way, when you think about driving culture and change into digital ways of working, it is a very, very fundamental thing to consider. You can have all of the best tools and technologies, but it's your own usability of that that really is at the core of making these things work.
Okay, if I could turn now to Renee. Renee, maybe we can talk a little bit about the labor market now, and you can weigh in on the impact the pandemic has had on the labor market. What are the top 2 or 3 noteworthy trends to you?
Okay, thanks, Lynn, and lovely to be here, and I'm loving the conversation already. I guess I'm going to build a little bit on what Anoop has just covered as well. I'll talk about 3 trends that are top of mind. The first one is not necessarily noteworthy, but it is that the future is flexible. So the way that we work going forward is going to be fundamentally different. The way that we collaborate, perhaps that we structure our teams, and of course the way that we use real estate will be very different. I think the other thing, and the second point though, that is really interesting is that reskilling won't be a choice anymore. It's actually an imperative. And that builds on, Ahmed was just talking about the millions that they've focused on training. Anoop's talking there about the TQ. That's exactly what we're talking about there, is that reskilling is going to be a fundamental. But pleasingly, most employees are looking for it. Mercer has found that 70% of employees are ready to reskill. If anything, employers are not quite putting it to the top of the priority list. And the third area, I think, is more important from a societal perspective, but we also need to be cognizant of it as organisations, and that is unfortunately that the inequality is probably deepening. So we're seeing already greater inequity happening very quickly in our society as the pandemic impacts the likes of certain minority groups or women. And we're also seeing, unfortunately, some of the great inroads that we've made in poverty get eroded, and we need to make sure that we act very fast so that doesn't get worse.
Thank you, Renee. If I can just follow up on your point on women, this has been in the news of late that, women are feeling more of the strain of managing jobs and family life, especially with children kept home from schools. And, we've seen some trends, more women than men are actually leaving the workforce. How do you think companies or even governments can ensure that the gains that women have made in the past decades aren't reversed by this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, we are seeing that. It's twofold. The impact on women is due to the fact that women are doing more at home, even today. Even in dual working in families, etc. That has become exacerbated during the pandemic with online school and these types of things that you've spoken about. So it is more challenging, and we are seeing already data that women are exiting the workforce at a higher rate. But I will say not at a dramatically higher rate, just as a portion there. The second area, I think, is around the impact of the industry sector. Many industry sectors employ women in the majority. They're sectors such as food and accommodation, hospitality, and retail. And of course, they're the sectors that have been most impacted by the pandemic. So we're seeing there already discrepancies in unemployment by gender. So companies really need to take stock of that. This is not something that we can afford to watch and to plan for in the future. It has to happen now. So Mercer's advising companies to, take an immediate look at your own company data. What's actually happening in your organisation with regards to the impact, engagement, and productivity for women exiting or entering the workforce, etc. The second one is don't plan policy changes and practices that will take months or years to implement. Actually put some things in place right now to alleviate any stress that is there immediately. Because if we don't, the inequity problem gets worse very quickly. And then the third is, what has been at the forefront for all organisations during the pandemic is communicate. You've got to communicate over and over and over again. You've got to role model that it's okay for people to put their circumstances at the forefront in the way that they work and find the working arrangement that works for them. And so, that's the advice that we're providing to companies, and it's really focused on taking action now, not waiting and observing how things go over coming months.
Thank you, Renee. Panelist, I'll turn to you now. Maybe you can give us some insights into how the pandemic has kind of reshaped the global or even the regional movement of talent. And also, what do you think are the roles or skills that are in demand now, and where do you see the opportunities? Which industries or economies are the opportunities in right now?
Thanks, Lynn, for having me on the debate. To begin with, I would start with an optimistic note that immigration or the movement of talent is not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay. If we look at current statistics, we have got about 200 million economic immigrants around the globe, and that's a huge number. So having said that, we may have a few short-term disruptions in the talent movement, regionally as well as globally. What we see is that majority of the businesses, because of the pandemic, are thinking of bringing supply chains closer to the users, so that in a situation like this in future, the disruption in supply chains could be minimized, business continuity plans could be ensured. So that is going to be one major aspect which may create some kind of a disruption in the coming times. The second piece is, since technology is enabling a lot of things in today's world, while talent is mobile, the jobs are also increasingly going to be mobile, which means that the jobs may not be specifically limited to the geographic areas. You could hire people from anywhere and you could hire people from everywhere. So while talent is mobile, jobs will also become mobile, and that is going to create a new dimension to the whole mobility aspect of talent. The third thing which I think in this context is that the definition of employment may reorient itself. Like what we have been traditionally looking at or understanding the employment as is exchange of time and money or value and money. But employment definition may change in the new normal. where it may not necessarily be the same as it was in the past. It's too early to say what that definition may be or how it's going to reorient itself, but it is definitely on the cards that the definition of employment will be reoriented. One of the fundamental reasons for that is while we have 200 million economic immigrants globally, parallelly at the same time, we have 150 million gig workers globally available today. And that's a huge number. So how these gig workers and these are all at the top end of the pyramid in terms of skill set. So how these 150 million gig workers are going to actually redefine the employment in the coming period will define how the talent will be moving around different geographies or regions, et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, these disruptions and evolution in the processes and the approach will continue to happen. There might be short-term disruption because of the travel restrictions and redefining of supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. But long-term, the definition of employment, mobility of jobs, and maybe a few other evolving factors post-pandemic may create a scenario, or we may get into a situation or a world which will redefine the whole mobility. But overall context is going to be that we are going to get more and more mobile, both in terms of talent as well as in terms of jobs. Now, if we look at the second part of your question was that what kind of skills would be required going forward? I think there are 3 or 4 things which are very, very critical to the future workforce. The first thing is the digital part of it. How digitally savvy we are, how comfortable we are in the digital space, and how we can reorient our thinking, our processes, our business models, our operation models, and have it more digitally oriented than brick and mortar models. So the workforce which will be more digitally savvy is going to be on the forefront of the world. That's number one. Number two is how are you going to be emotionally and socially reoriented in terms of your own personal self? How can you, like if we look at the pandemic situation at this point in time, we are hearing a lot of things about stress. We are hearing a lot of things about people unable to cope up with new normals, et cetera, et cetera. So how the workforce is going to socially and emotionally reorient themselves is going to be a key skill with digital. And third important piece, which probably Anup also touched upon a bit, is how adaptable and how resilient you would be going forward. Because if a situation like these, and we are expecting many more situations like these to come in future, so how can you adapt the change that time, and how you can be resilient to whatever rough weathers you have to face during that time is going to define that how better you will be placed in those times. So I think digital orientation, the second is emotional and social quotient, and third is your adaptability and resilience is going to define your survival. So it may not be survival of the best, but it will be survival of the people who would have these 3 key skill areas embedded in their personalities.
Okay, thank you for that. So Ahmed, maybe I'll go back to you. You know, given these trends and these developments that our Panelist has mentioned, you know, including this reorientation of I guess, you know, our views of work, you know, what skill sets do you think business leaders need, you know, with this shift in this workforce model? And how can leaders, you know, rally employees, win hearts and minds if you know, a lot of the interaction is now going to be taking place on a screen or even remotely?
Sorry, I may have been on mute. My apologies. So thank you for the question. And just connecting the dots between what Renee, Anup, and Panelist just mentioned. Firstly, thank God that this pandemic hit us in 2020 and not in 2015. I mean, we would have just not been prepared for this. But gladly, we were more prepared digitally to engage with and get the workforce back in place. But what it has left us is 3 or 4 attributes that I would call as leaders that we need to exhibit more of. The first is around energy, right? I mean, I joined Microsoft 9 months ago, 5 weeks COVID-free, right? The rest it's been all virtual. So how do I as a leader engage with my teams and create energy virtually? How do I generate energy? How do I energize people when some are stuck in little apartments? When some people are stuck trying to find a little corner in a room trying to work with, wobbly bandwidth? What do you do to energize your people? The other is establishing clarity. It is superbly important to ensure that your people clearly understand where you are headed. It is about establishing truth, by the way. Clarity is about truth as well. It's not only about optimism. The third, I'd say, is empathy. And perhaps the need for empathy will be significantly more accelerated when the hybrid world starts. Because why is it that I can be in the office today and somebody cannot? Why is it that I can travel today and somebody cannot? And as leaders, we'll have to expand the aperture of empathy in a very significant way. And lastly, I'll say, look, nobody on this planet can say, from my experience, this is how you deal with it, because perhaps nobody was here in 1918 and has memories of 1918. So in this world, keeping a very open mind and having a learner's mindset is probably the last. So I'd say energy, clarity, empathy, and learning are the 4 that I'd recommend leaders to think about.
Okay. Thank you for that very succinct summary at the end as well. Anu, maybe you can just talk about then, what will it be like for employees? We know that, proximity has always been a key factor for employees to kind of secure a spot on the A team in any organization. So, with remote working, how should employees themselves ensure that this adage of out of sight, out of mind doesn't hold for them? And for leaders, does it mean changing the metrics and processes by which they assess who their top employees are?
Yeah, I mean, looking at my own organization and the industry that we're in, that has predominantly been based on a lot of face-to-face interaction, the last 9 months have been interesting to get used to a very different model with a workforce of over 500,000 now that's working remotely. I think there are a couple of things that are critical to think about in this. And as Ahmed said, I can only speak from what's happened to us over the last 9 months because the reality of our own business is really the judge at the minute. I think personalization is important. He summarized it in a number of factors. Simple things. We've got used to using Teams. I have to admit, we never used to use video so much. We always used to use audio, and personalization is important, and finding opportunities to try to collaborate face-to-face is important, because you do need an element of direct face-to-face interaction where it is appropriate. You just have to anchor it in the right way. I think some other things that we've started to realize in our organization is the value of team and shared success is also important. And in a virtual environment, creating that notion of shared success and moving away from individual to a shared success environment, even with your measurement system, which is something that we're doing ourselves at the moment, is very critical. Defining a less controlling performance regime, where you are asking individuals to set their own performance objectives and be a little bit more self-evaluating on how they see themselves. and then encouraging team metrics versus individual metrics, I think is a critical factor in the environment that we're in. And frankly, we have, in parallel to all of this, been considering our own business model. And I think a lot of corporates will need to think about moving away from the very traditional, centrally controlled business models to a much more network business model with more empowerment out in the field, and individuals feeling more empowered, accountable, and owning what they do within a performance measurement system that drives collaboration using shared success, as I mentioned. Then I think there's something else. And I think the environment that we're in now is an environment where, social responsibility is important. It's certainly on the mind of a lot of the workforce that are coming into work now. And in some cases, it's their determining factor on the value system of the organization that they want to work for. And I think that means that purpose matters. Purpose being something that relates to beyond the services that you provide, but what is it that fundamentally that you are about, and what is it that you're trying to do in the environment within which you're operating, and having something that binds everybody together beyond the actual services or what the organization does, into something that's got a broader meaning for people, so that they feel that they're part of something greater than this, particularly within the environment that we're in, especially in today's world where responsible business and doing things in the right way is so important, I think is vital. And I think it's those factors that can really create the right environment for people to operate in this very different hybrid world.
Okay, thank you. On the topic of environment, Renee, maybe you can weigh in at this point. Do you think that physical offices will still be relevant? What roles will they play now that we're moving towards this hybrid workforce model?
Yeah, it's been an interesting and a fascinating journey this year. If we could ever have said that the world would move to working from home or working virtually literally overnight, there would have been IT departments all around the world in every organization that would have studied it for years and said, no, it wasn't possible. It was possible, and we've all done it. And then, of course, we went to organizations saying, well, we're all working from home now. It's working fabulously. Do we need offices, etc.? Of course, there's realism in all of that as we've gone on for months and months. And now the question really is around this hybrid model, as you said, Lynn. What is the office for? How do we redefine the way that we work and the way that we use those office spaces? So we're already seeing, of course, organisations looking and reassessing their real estate footprint, looking at whether they need, lots of different desks or cubicles for people to do emails. Probably not, but will they need space for, people to come together in groups to collaborate, to create, to share? We're also looking at organisations that recognise, to get to Ahmed's point around empathy, that the office is a place for personal connection and relationships as well. So from a work perspective, it'll be coming together to collaborate, create, make new, if you like. But there's also an element of, we're human beings and we need other human beings. And so that place to create. And we're seeing, already companies start to think about what, kitchen space or collaboration space, coffee spaces that they have there for people to build those connections. And then the third thing that I think that all companies are really only just starting to think about, but it is really important, is that, in this hybrid model, it won't be the same for everybody. So if you ask, and I'm generalizing here, but some younger workers that are earlier in their career, we've done research that says that they would like a hybrid model, but they might only work from home 1 day a week. If you ask more experienced workers in our research, people that had 10, 15 years of work experience, they're saying that they'll happily work from home 2 or 3 days a week, 3 easily. And so we need to recognise that, different groups, different people will have different needs. And we're going to need to, encourage and have those guidelines so that we have this diverse workforce that uses an office space to create, with diversity as well, as opposed to just the same people.
Thanks. I'm going to turn now to questions from the audience. We've received quite a few. This is from Laura Faulkner. How should governments help fresh graduates or undergraduates jumpstart their career in this climate? I'm going to throw in a question of my own as well. You know, it's really about how companies now need to think about privileges to attract and retain talent. Panelist, I wonder if you could tackle this question about helping fresh grads and also the privileges that companies need to think about.
Yeah, this is an ongoing debate. I think this is now for a very long time. Most of the countries or most of the regions have been facing with that. How do you actually get the fresh graduates into a productive workforce? And most of the regions or countries have struggled with this. And I think one of the basic reasons for that is that the academia and the professionals and the practitioners, they are not in sync with each other, or the course material, what is designed in our colleges and schools, is not actually aligned to what we practice in general world when we are working for organizations. So I have been advocating it for a very long time that there needs to be greater participation of practitioners while designing the syllabus or syllabi of various courses. That will be the first starting point. And governments need to step in and facilitate and create an environment where more and more practitioners are included in designing the course material. That's number one. Number two, what I think is where we lack is that what we prepare students for in today's world is the world of today. But we forget that they are going to come out of the college, or maybe they are going to come out of the educational system maybe 4 years, 6 years, or 10 years from now. And the world that time would be very different. And when they come out in the workspace, they find themselves disaligned or misaligned because they have been taught something else, and what the world has moved is at a very different place. So we need to prepare people with a thought that these guys are going to be the workforce of future, and what are going to be the future possibilities of the workforce. Skills need to be reassigned and redeveloped accordingly. So these are the two fundamental things which governments, practitioners, and academicians need to work together on. And that's the only way to actually help the fresh grads to really find their place in the new world. So that's one part of it. And the second part, I think what you spoke about is the benefits piece of it. I think going forward, what Rennie was saying, that there is going to be either work from anywhere, or it's going to be a hybrid model, or it's going to be maybe some other shape which may happen in future. That world probably will need some kind of customization of benefits. Like it may not be a world where one piece fits all. We will have to customize. So it will be, the differentiations could be regional, it could be local versus rural versus urban, or there could be a lot of other nuances which may come in place. However, there will be maybe 2 or 3 things which will remain fundamental across all these needs. And one of the important things is going to be your comprehensive health plans. That what kind of health plan support businesses are going to offer to their employees. I think that's going to be one of the very important pieces. The another piece, what Ahmed was referring to at the beginning of the debate, was the learning and skilling and recycling of the workforce. So we have seen over the last couple of years that technology evolves every 2-3 years. We find ourselves in a very different world. So you have to prepare and keep on skilling and recycling your workforce so that they are ready for next 3 years or next 6 years, so on and so forth. And I think third thing, which is very important to us, where probably employees of future may need support, is entertainment. in that world, when you are working from anywhere, you are not connected as much as you were connected with your office colleagues, or you are not interacting with the outside world at the same scale as you were doing it in the past. But what kind of entertainment options are you creating so that you give your employees downtime? So these are three critical areas. And overall, at the top of this, I would say that all these employees, especially the ones who would be working out of anywhere or out of home, may need some kind of a concierge service from their organizations, so that while they are working from their home, their needs and their logistic things and their other connections are being taken care of. So I think maybe the benefits will evolve in this direction going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we have time for maybe one or two other audience questions. I have a question here from Douglas Tao. What do you think is the key ingredient in building this future workforce in such a way that it is immune to other similar shocks in future? Maybe Amit, you'd like to tackle this one?
Mute. Yeah, thank you. You know, I wish I could say we have unity. Nobody at the end of last year could have ever predicted. I describe the world as COVID 1.0 is a state of being. COVID 2.0 could be a state of being, which could be significantly more limiting than today. And what we have to be prepared for is having an open mind to determining what we do in terms of our evolution and innovation. Businesses need to start preparing for the world with high resilience on operations, higher resilience in technology, and greater flexibility and agility. The winners of between now and the potentially, you know, the next crisis are the ones that can adapt and be agile.
Okay, and the final question from Linda Ting Bradford. For people who are retrenched during this time period, what are companies doing, or what can companies do to help them get back on track? I'm wondering if Renee, maybe you'd like to respond to this, and then Anup can jump in as well if you have any comments.
Sure, I think for, you know, there's many people that are impacted, of course. Many people are taking opportunities to you know, assess their own careers and where they want to go, but really specifically to focus on that reskilling piece. And there's an enormous range of tools there to help individuals to learn and to skill. And so we're certainly seeing that. But while there are industry sectors that are impacted, there are many that are growing as well. So I think what it requires is, in this instance, to think expansively about your skills and what you know, but also to think expansively about your career, your industry sector, etc. Because if you think more about skills as opposed to roles you've done, there's a lot more flexibility in where you can go from there. And I think that's the future that we're talking about. It's less about roles and a predetermined set of experiences that you have. It's more about skills that you've amassed that you can then deploy into different jobs, different environments, etc. And I think if people can start to think about that, it does open up new opportunities.
Okay, what about you, Anup? What are your views on this?
Lynn, just to add in, I think we've seen quite a few examples, inspiring examples of people who have, during this period, taken very different directions in what they're doing, as Renee said, to use their skill sets in a different way. I guess thinking about this in the positive angle, the one benefit of the environment that we are now in this virtual and hybrid world is you can genuinely use talent in a completely different way. There is no reason why someone in one part of the world that has a particular specialist skill couldn't go and do some work in another part of the world. And so I think there's a lot less boundaries in this environment than we think. It requires individuals to think about their skills, as Renee said, and take the opportunity to skill themselves in different in different areas, and all of that is now available virtually. And also for employers to think about the talent pools that they've got, which are now global talent pools. They're not necessarily limited to the physical locations in which people are, and arguably that almost creates much more. It creates boundaryless opportunities for people if they focus on developing their own skills and talent.
Okay, thanks. Well, that seems to be all the time we have today. We've come to the end of the session, and I'd like to thank our speakers, Renee, Ahmed, Anoop, and Panelist for sharing their insights, and also to our audience for tuning in. On behalf of the South China Morning Post and the Milken Asia Institute, have a good Friday ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.